This week on It's Clear as Mud, we're going to take some time and design a pottery chop or a pottery stamp that will allow you to professionally sign your work.
Hi, this is Jeff Patterson. We're going to make chops today. We talked in the last video about signing your pottery, and I think it's really important that you do so. These are chops that I've made and that I've used for a long time. They're made by pressing clay into carved plaster. And some of them are used by making rubber stamps, but that's advanced. There are lots of different ways of doing it. But today I'm only going to show you one way to get you going. And if you guys are interested in stamping and stamps and sprigging, well, down the road these are some little sketches that I've done for designs. And of course they're going to be much smaller than this, but this gives you an idea of what you could do with just my initials of JP and create a fairly decent little chop. So simple is better. These are obviously much larger than the little squares you're dealing with, so you don't have as much room to do carving. You know, you're working in a small area with tiny and sharp tools. But this gives you an idea of the kind of thing that you could a series of little designs that you could sketch up before you get going on this project that will be a run on one central theme, and this central theme is just my initials. It could be graphic, it could be anything. As far as graphics, I have my chop. If you've seen it on the intro or on my YouTube thing, is a pyramid that looks like that, and then it's got a frame on it like so. And what happens with that pyramid is it could be a hole, it could be going in, so it's also an optical illusion, which is what I liked about it. It could be a hole going in or a pyramid coming up kind of deal. So it's kind of cool. So think about that, and then let's move on. So you're gonna need a piece of plaster, and I cast my plaster in a little disposable dish that something comes from the market. You can buy inexpensive, like a little milk container of plaster at the market, at the hardware store. And you're gonna need an exacto-knife. You need some dental tools if you have them, they're great. If not, a sharpened nail and a stick will work, especially if it's a fine nail. But something to get down into the plaster and carve with. A couple of pencils, a couple of good sharp pencils to write on the plaster with. And a razor blade to clean the surface of the plaster. And the other thing is that I have also, in this method, I have cut a chunk of plaster off of one to make a stick of plaster that you can also carve. And that's another option that's available to you. But we're going to be making the clay ones today. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, the first thing realistically to do is to clean off the plaster. You want a nice smooth surface, and you want to get anything off of there that's on there. So I take the razor blade and I scrape the plaster, and you're going to be creating some dust here, so you want to be careful with that. And you also don't want to get that dust into your clay. Not necessarily so much the stamps, but any scraps that you might drag back into your studio and reprocess. Plaster will explode those pieces. Okay. So you can draw your design on the plaster and then carve into it. And I'm going to use this brand that we had as a kid, and it's a J, which is like that, and it's a P, which is like that. It's a JP. And when that gets framed, when I finally clear the outside of it, it'll have a frame on it like so. And that's going to look pretty good. The smaller these are, the easier they are to work with. And I have some tiny ones. I end up making tiny ones, but for right now, I need you to be able to see it. So if you want to work smaller, you can work smaller. But we're just going to do the internal part. We're just going to do the J and the P. So So I'm starting with an exacto-knife, and I'm cutting out my design, like so. And getting that line on the plaster. Plaster is a little tricky to carve. It's easier to carve when it's wet or damp. And that's something to consider and something to even try if you want to. Okay, like so. Probably shouldn't be blowing that dust around. It's not really good hygiene. Hygiene is something we're going to talk about in the future if you want to survive to be an old potter. Got to use good hygiene in the studio.
Okay, I'm going to give you another little camera view here so you can see what I'm doing with the tools. I'm going in with the dental tool and I'm deepening this up. I would say 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters is about a minimum that you want, and that will give you a decent looking stamp at the end of it. You want to make sure that the troughs, the grooves that you're digging are equal and even all the way across. And you want to really try not to break off the corners of anything. If you're working on a geometric pattern like this, those corners are easy to pop off of there if you twist your tool. So I think what I'd do now is I'll come in with an exacto knife and clean up those corners, go in and make sure that the corners are at the same depth as the rest of the groove and that they're nice and sharp, and that the sharpness or the crispness of that design has a chance to pop out when I make my stamp and I stamp it into my pottery.
So once you get your design, a piece of clay, and go in and clean up the design first. Pull any junk that's in there out so that you have a nice clean. And you can see how deep that is. That's not bad. And so let's draw some lines on here so you can remember where your stamp is, right? Okay. We're going to take a little piece of clay and we're going to really push it down in there. We're going to really work it down into that stamp so it's nice and deep. Then we take another piece of clay and we turn it into a handle. We want a fairly decent handle for this. And push that down. Line that up with the cross arm so you got it where you want it. Push that down too. Smush that down so it's on there firm, and then push your handle down a little bit so you got something to grab onto in the future. Okay. Then we're going to pull that off, and there's your stamp. Okay. So I'm going to make a couple of more of those real quick and let you watch me do it. Like so. What you want to do is dry these. Now I'm going to dry them with a blow dryer. Just because I haven't got that much time. So I'm going to hit this with a blow dryer a little bit and dry it up. But you want to wait till these get leather hard. And you can work with them if they're past that, but that's difficult to do. You want them pretty much just leather hard. And then once they start to dry out, and you can come in and cut that off. And this is where you frame them. This is where they get framed, because you create a nice frame around your stamp that pushes that into the clay. Like so. And you want that to be relatively tight. You can see where it's important to have it be leather hard here. This is pretty soft stuff. Okay. Now you can clean up your handle a little bit. And there's your stamp. So you want these bisqued, and you want to make a bunch of them. Once you get them bisqued, once you bisque one, you can come in and make a master one for yourself, like so. And then you can bisque that and fire it. I don't have any of these bisqued and fired right now, but those two little masters, make a bunch of them, because you end up dropping these things and they end up going away. You lose them. So here's one that I've hardened up. Let's just pretend that one's fired. Here's another one. Those are both relatively hard. I can come in with soft clay and push it into a fired one, just like we did with the plaster. And make another stamp. So this one's available to be trimmed up too, and they just keep getting smaller. But that allows me to create multiples once I have a couple of masters around, just to keep in a box. I keep a lozenge box full of stamps. I have lots of different stamps. I've used lots of them over the years. I probably shouldn't have. Okay. So I thank you for your time. If I've been helpful and I've earned your subscription, please subscribe and find us on Instagram if you can. And hope to see you again. Here's mud in your eye. Bye-bye.